Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are with Grenzo Havoc Razor. This deck comes to us from Pajur, who says, make the deck more powerful while keeping its identity. Very, very direct, I appreciate that. And they've said, no token strategy, no stacks, cards costing more than $4 will be proxies. I do have some thoughts on these, but I don't know if token strategies involve, because there is some tokens in the deck. I assume that means not a full token strategy. No stacks. That's a wide net, but I'll see what I can do. And even have something to think about the proxying. But all that will come in due time. But before we go into that, it's a great time to remind you that if you would like to send me a deck yourself, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like your deck to be the next deck I work on, there is another link in the video description down below. And finally, while you're down there, you can find the deck list that we're looking at there as well. So Grenzo, Havoc, Razor, who are they and why are they the head of our deck? Grenzo Havoc Razor is 2 mana Goblin Rogue for 2 red. And he says, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, choose one. Goad one of their creatures, or exile the top card of that player's library. Until the end of turn, you may cast that card by spending mana as if it was mana of any color. Now, this is a very standard, straightforward, aggressive red strategy. Some people can do it Goblin Tribal, some people can lean into other things. This deck has a bit of an unblockability theme in it, but the main goal of the deck is to leverage both of those abilities. Now, the second ability of exiling cards off the top of your opponent's decks, I think is a little bit stronger, but the Goad ability is equally strong when used properly, especially against players who have very defensive kind of boards. I think you can force them to attack with those big creatures and get some incidental damage through your opponents that you yourself could not do, especially towards opponents that have just very, very big creatures. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the deck. This is the third version of the deck. I'm not sure what the first two look for. I guess I could go seeing. My goodness, there's 505 considering cards. I did not look through that. We'll get back to them. But looking at the curve, the majority of the deck is very, very straightforward. I think the majority of the deck is in 3 mana or less, with a few outliers here and there, with of course our very famous Blasphemous Act at 9 mana, and Burned Blast Furnace Hellkite being actually a little cheaper than it appears because you can sacrifice artifacts to it. Apex of Power being our 1/10 mana card, but the rest being all over the place, but generally low, which I rather like. Even with that, we have a pretty high amount of lands. I think we could probably go down a single land if we cut down the curve, but we'll get there in a moment. Looking at the deck itself, I generally really like where it's at. I do like that the majority of our low mana creatures have some sort of evasion, and we have several different unblockable creatures to begin with. We have Gingerbrute, Tin Street Dodger that are 1 mana to become basically unblockable. Phoenix Chick with, flying, which is a form of evasion. So these 3 all have haste. Then we have another flying haste. We have a haste creature that creates haste flying creatures. Another haste creature, horsemanship that can't be blocked, and then a few straight up unblockable creatures. I'm a pretty big fan of this. Outside of near the bottom of it, outside of Magus of the Wheel and Bothersome Quasit, but even then Quasit has Menace, almost all of our creatures are built to be extremely evasive, and I do think that's a lot of fun. So it's very clear that right away we're going into the theme of getting Grenzo out and starting to get some triggers. Now, with that in mind, this is where I want to address some of the cards that I think are kind of unnecessary. Let's start with False Orders, which you cast during the Declare Blocker step, and then you remove target creature defending player controls from combat. Creatures it was blocking that had become blocked by only that creature this combat become unblocked. You may have it block an attacking creature of your choice. What a specific card. I do like it. It's very old Magic style. But this card, and honestly cards like it, like Falter and let's see, Magistrate's Veto, we'll come back to Bedlam in a second. These cards kind of catch me off as a little unnecessary. Now, False Orders is interesting because it is a form of removal, because it doesn't say that you have to be the one attacking the player. So you can cast this on someone else's attack to force a bad block. So I do like that, but even that has some problems. We'll come to that problem in a second, but the first point against these cards, I think, is that we already have a lot of unblockability. So I don't think we necessarily need more of it. I think in between our evasive creatures, our straight up unblockable creatures, and our ability to goad creatures, forcing them to be tapped on the next turn, these cards are just going to do very little work. So I'm very, very keen on getting rid of pretty much all of them. Going back to False Orders for a second and talking about how you can use it as removal, it's important to note that with Goad and a few of the other creatures can't block abilities that we have, or even Bothersome Quasit, all of a sudden this ability doesn't become as good, because if you have Bothersome Quasit out, which is a very good card, and you go to a bunch of creatures, those creatures can't block anything, so you can't use False Orders. Even if they're untapped, False Orders won't do anything. So with that in mind, I think False Orders should go as well, despite it being a pretty high ceiling card. Now, the one I haven't mentioned is Bedlam, and that's because I think Bedlam is really, really interesting. I know it kind of does the same thing I just said, where it stops, your creatures are mostly unblockable anyways, so it doesn't make that much of a difference. But I will note that it is valuable in the sense that it really changes the rules of the game. And if all of a sudden you start goading your opponent's creatures way, way more, this is definitely a win condition. You cast Bedlam, and then from that point on, all your attacks goad as many creatures as you possibly can. I'm a really, really big fan of this. Now, I think this and Bothersome Quasit are very, very similar cards. I just think it's nice to have duplicates of it, so I don't see this as much of a problem. So I really do like Bedlam. Going through our creatures, Measures of the Wheel, I paused on it for a moment. I really don't think it fits our strategy. I think I do get the idea of using this as a draw 7 is interesting, but we just have better draw cards in red. We have better card advantage, and this is just like a 2-turn clunky kind of thing. It's a 3-mana 3/3 that until you sacrifice it doesn't really do anything. I don't particularly like it, and I don't think it fits into the theme of the deck. Another one I think doesn't particularly fit into the theme of the deck is Goblin Snowman. What is it doing here? Why is it here? It is a defensive creature that prevents combat damage and deals 1 damage to the creature it blocks. It must be here for some kind of sentimental value, because otherwise this card just isn't very good. And if someone explains to me how it's actually a secret combo where you force people to attack you and deal damage to them, I really don't like that. This is too much mana. It's not an aggressive creature in our deck. If this was also like it can't be dealt damage from creatures that block it, maybe there'd be something there, but even then, 4 mana 1/1, I don't like it. I think it's a very, very easy cut. Anger here feels a little out of place because we don't have a lot of ways to discard it. I'm going to introduce a few, but even then, I just feel like it's kind of hard to put it in the graveyard, so just take note of that. I think playing this as a 4-mana 2/2 haste isn't ideal, even with the idea that on combat it will die and grant all your creatures haste. I just think it's a little unnecessary. All right, looking at our sorceries, Temp with Vengeance is always one that I think is kind of interesting. Now, I think Temp with Vengeance is rather good when you have Bedlam out in play. But at this moment, the creatures don't come in tapped, and they're just there to block your creatures. So if you can get Bedlam out, if you can do some kind of Like that with Falter is really, really good. But the thing is on the turn you cast Tempt with Vengeance, you want to spend all of your mana on Tempt with Vengeance. You don't want to hold up mana for a card that makes them unblockable. So unless you have Bedlam out, I don't really see this card being particularly good. It is an interesting card in combination with things like Bedlam, but like right now here, I just don't really see it. So I think this is an easy cut. This one's more just an opinion on your restrictions. From the Ashes, destroying all non-basic lands. Is this stacks to you? I don't think so. I don't tend to think of mass land destruction as tax. So, in fact, it even returns the lands for them. So, like, it's not ruinous. Ruin, right? Sorry, my brain is destroy all non-basic lands. Ruination, I wasn't far off. Is there a reason this is not Ruination? Would that be stacks to you? I'm not sure. I'm a little curious because I'm going to have a suggestion near the end that I don't know if it skirts the rule. But, I mean, if you like the ability, I think you should just play Ruination. If you like From the Ashes, just play Ruination. And if you don't, it is just a little over your budget, but you can proxy it as said before. But I think it's a straight upgrade to this card. So if you can swap those out, I think you'll have a lot of luck. Otherwise, I think this is fine because people are going to run out of basics really fast, so it's not the worst. But what I like is Ruination is good even early game, but early game From the Ashes, they're almost guaranteed to have enough basics to replace the non-basics they lose. So with that in mind, this is only a late game play where you can actually overwhelm their amount of basics. So with that in mind, I think Ruination is better if you can make the budget for it. Interestingly enough, Ren's Resolve I don't like as much. I think at this mana cost, I'd just rather you be attacking your opponent because your exile your own cards to play them are really good. Inspired Tinkering and Apex of Power are really, really good cards. So having this one low power one feels kind of strange to me. I'd much rather it be another creature you can attack with. Personally, that's my opinion because I think at the end I'd rather just save this ability for the later stuff. What was Spectacular Showdown? Double strike counter, goad on each creature. Interesting. So permanent goads them. This is interesting. I don't think I have a problem with that. I think this is an interesting card. Okay. Looking at our instance otherwise, I think Delayed Blast Fireball is the only one that really catches my eye. So it's 3 mana to deal 2 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. And then from exile, I guess then you just never foretell this card. I think that's what keeps catching me off guard. I keep reading the foretell cost, and honestly, you do not want to foretell this card. It is just a tremendous amount of mana. I guess it is a one-sided board clear, but that is... or like a non-symmetrical board clear, but it is 6 mana plus the foretell cost of 2, so 8 mana to do so. I don't really love this. I guess maybe if you deal damage to your opponents in 5s, it feels kind of good. But for me, a lot of the time, at this point, when you have the ability to pay the 6 for this, your opponents will have bigger creatures than 5/5s, so I don't think it's essential. And even then, I guess you can just goad those creatures. I don't know. I think this is just fine. I'm pretty much on the needle going back and forth trying to figure out what exactly I want this card for. And I guess against token strategies, but even then you have so many cards that are really powerful for this. I don't know. I'm going to just say it's okay. Whereas maybe like something like one of our newer ones, so 2 damage to all creatures. There was one recently that, I guess it's not here. Well, I can't quite remember it, but there was one recently, I think it had Ren on it, so it would have been from March of the Machines. So for the sake of it, I'm going to try to find it real fast. All right, let's see. Let's look for Ren. It might have been Sorcery Speed, and if it's Sorcery Speed, I don't see it being worth playing. I guess it's somewhere else. Maybe I'm just thinking of the wrong card. I was sure there was a card that would either deal 2 damage to all creatures or exile the top 2 cards from your deck, but I might be just into the fire. There it is. It is sorcery speed, and it is all creatures including your own. So I guess if I'm just looking for this ability to deal 2 damage to all opponent's creatures, this is pretty fine. Okay, I'll say it's fine. I'm also surprised this is $8, but moving on. Savage Beating feels like a lot of mana, but I think it's fine. I think I have a suggestion that's probably a little more straightforward, but I don't mind it. Our enchantments I do particularly like. I've already said the ones I don't like. The artifacts, I feel some of them are overkill. Lantern of Insight, all it does is show you, I guess, who to attack. But there's going to be a lot of boards where it doesn't help you that much. Remember, you're playing quantity, not quality. The idea is if you're attacking consistently, you're going to be able to take 2 or 3 cards from an opponent. And Lantern of Insight only lets you see the top card. And with that in mind, I'm a little weak on it. I think it's fine, but I think there's a lot of boards that you just don't care. Like, think of it in the sense that you're sitting there, you look at your opponent's cards, and each of them have a land on top. So that's nothing. But let's be more generous. One of them has a soul ring on top, so you decide to attack them. But it doesn't help you decide where the other, 6 creatures you have are going, right? Because the rest of that information is hidden information. It's possible that your opponent, a card under their land, has a super powerful card you'd love to play. However, you just do not know because it is just not accessible to you with the Lantern of Insight, being there. There's something I said a bunch of videos ago where I talked about, I think it was Urza's glasses or something. It was like the idea that certain cards that all they do is give you information are kind of crutches to play with. And I still feel really strongly. I know someone had a bit of a rebuttal, but they didn't change my mind at all. Lantern of Insight is a card you shouldn't be using because you should, if you are looking for the value of your spells, like of stealing spells, you should know who to attack. You should kind of be able to figure it out. I'll give an example. A game I played recently at for the MTG Mudsta channel involved me using Gix. And Gix, I was going to use Gix's ability to discard my hand that contained a lot of cards to steal a lot of cards off of opponents' decks. And I had 3 different opponents with 3 different decks. And I won't go too much into it, but, and you probably won't see it in the video whenever it comes out, is that, well, I had to make a decision on who to target. I didn't even have the, the luxury of spreading my attacks out the way Grenzo does. I had to pick someone for everything, and I ended up picking the correct choice, I would say, but it's important to note that that decision was made with 0 information that I had. And so that is the state you want your deck to be in, that you don't need things like Lantern of Insight. So though it has some perks, I think it's just holding you back, and it is a slot that can be filled with something else. So I would definitely cut the Lantern here. Ankh of Mishra feels very, very strange. I just don't understand. This is not the kind of deck that uses something like this. Like, you traditionally want this in a deck that has a lot of like group slug where you're constantly dealing damage to your opponents, whereas this just feels petty damage here and there, and I don't quite understand the purpose of it. Perhaps the situation is that your opponents, like your play group, tends to run a lot of ramp, and in that case I understand this, but otherwise, because you don't have a way to tutor it, you don't have a way to reliably get it, even then I don't particularly like it, and it doesn't seem to be on theme with your deck, so I would cut that. Likewise, Ebony Fly is just a card I don't particularly like. It is it is a lot of work to turn this into a creature. It's 2 mana to cast, 4 to turn into a creature, and then you don't even know the size of your creature. I guess that you've got a pretty high chance of it being a pretty strong creature. I am just personally unimpressed by this card, but if at worst it's like, I don't know, basically one of the diamond mana rocks, I guess it's not so bad. I always think of this, I don't like the second half, but if you're only using the first half, I think it's fine. Ruby Medallion, likewise, it's out of your budget, but I guess you have one, and I think Yeah, I think it's rather good here. I don't like these cards, but I think it's fine. Strixhaven Stadium definitely feels... I don't know. I really do not like this card because I understand a lot of... last time I criticized this card, people told me that using it with a bunch of tokens and or double strike enables immediate wins, and I do get that, but that's assuming your opponents have absolutely no interaction on that turn you cast it. And if you cast this like just like a mana rock, you know, you have immediately caught the ire of all of your opponents who are going to work together to take you out because you are very threatening. And this deck especially is incredibly threatening with Strixhaven Stadium. You play this, people assume they'll never get attacks in because of all of the goading, and that you'll get a lot of attacks in, and therefore they will focus on you. Now you might think, but Cursed, you just said this deck is very threatening with this card. Doesn't that mean we should play it? See, the thing is, there is a difference between being threatening with a card and being successful with a card. For you to be successful with this card, you really need to be very far ahead. But you will always be threatening as if you are very, very far ahead when you play this card. So what you're going to get is a response from all of your opponents as if you are the strongest player in the at the table. You become arch enemy, even if you are unable to back up that aggression. If your opponents have like a few key removal spells or a board clear, and then they all commit to taking you out, that's going to be very difficult for you to get back from if they coordinate their attacks very well. And this card very much so incentivizes them to coordinate those attacks. I hope that makes sense. I know people will continue to play this card despite what I say, but I really think this is a card that's going to lose you more games than it wins you. Mind's Eye is the last card, I think. Mind's Eye and Coveted Jewel. But Coveted Jewel, I can see it being very powerful here, so I'm going to say that's fine. But Mind's Eye itself, I think, is a bit clunky here. I think you can just do better. You're drawing cards off of your opponent's decks. I don't think you're going to have tons and tons of mana to constantly kind of have open. So Mind's Eye is a card that was always suggested to me when I first started Commander, way back when the first precons came out. And I think the mentality behind it was that this is just a very good card draw in colors that cannot draw cards well. And at that time, that was blue and black were the only colors that could draw cards well, and the rest of the colors were just kind of dealing with it. But Mind's Eye but we don't play in that format anymore. We have so many options and so many different, ways of drawing cards that Mind's Eye just feels rather clunky. The only time I really like it is when you can cheat it into play. So devoted ramp or artifact decks, then I like Mind's Eye, because getting this card out really early and then being able to constantly pay for that one is just really strong, and I do appreciate this. Also, if you play this and someone with Smothering Tithe is in the room, they're going to be really happy you did. So there is some other downsides to a card like this. Okay, that's generally my suggestions. So those are the cards that I believe should be cut. Let's go into my suggestions. They're in no particular order except for the last few, so let's take a look. Sticky Fingers and by association Beantown Beatstick are two cards. I think I saw them on your I think they were in your cards that you were thinking of. I think they're really nice inclusions. They are cards that I like in aggressive red-based decks because they kind of do the same thing in different ways. Sticky Fingers is an aura, and Beantown Beatstick is an equipment. And they both give menace, though the Beatstick gives +1, and they both say whenever the creature deals combat damage, you create a treasure token. I think this is really good, even if the menace isn't as important in your deck because your creatures have, some of them are straight up unblockable, but Flying Menace is definitely, like putting this on the Phoenix chick, I think is a really nice kind of combination of evasion that makes it like guaranteed that they will hit. Then the treasure token each turn turns these creatures into mana dorks, and because you will get this treasure after you hit, and therefore after you get the sorry, my brain just stopped, the exile off the top, the Grenzo trigger, if you're exiling off the top of their deck, you now have a little extra mana to either bank or spend it right away on a card. So I do really like that. Sticky Fingers, I especially like that once the creature dies, you get this card. You basically go neutral because you draw a card. I do really like that. And Beamtown Beatstick is just generally good, but it stays on the battlefield. I don't like that it says equip 2. This is why I kind of undervalue this card versus the Sticky Fingers, but I do like both of them. I believe both of these cards are in my cube, or at least one. I know for sure Sticky Fingers is in my cube, but I find them to be very, very good in aggressive strategies. The next creature I want to... there's going to be a lot of treasure here, so I might as well go out of my way to start here, is Magda Brazen Outlaw. So Magda does not have evasion. This is the one thing I think she is kind of lacking, but she takes advantage of a lot of the evasion you create, namely with all of your goading. And Magda, every time she attacks, she will create a treasure token. Pretty straightforward. She's like Budget Ragavan. And what I really like about this is that, one, with Grenzo, it's like you've built your own Ragavan, but two, that second ability of sacrificing 5 treasures is actually kind of relevant, because you can cheat in your Blast Furnace Hellkite, which I think is very, very good. I also particularly like that it lets you cheat in Coveted Jewel, which is also extremely strong, especially when you do this at instant speed, so you can hold up Magda and 5 treasures, wait until your last opponent's end step, cheat out Coveted Jewel to draw 3 cards, and have this untap. Really, I guess it doesn't come in tapped, right? I always think it comes in tapped. So no, you can do it anytime. Really, really nice. If you keep Mind's Eye, Magda is definitely a way you can cheat it out, and I do significantly like that more. But I think between Blast Furnace and Coveted Jewel, that's enough targets for this. And otherwise, you're just going to keep attacking with this creature to continuously get more treasures. So I like that quite a bit. But something I like even more is the Sardian Avenger. And so this is a card that is actually meant to be anti-treasures, but I think is generally very, very good with like in this deck. And so I also like this was lauded as being incredibly sought after, but considering its price, definitely think this is a card on the list to pick up. But so this has First Strike Trample, and it grows in size as your opponents have artifacts. And no matter if they're playing treasure tokens or not, this is the kind of card that you will be very, very happy to attack with. Because even a 2/1 First Strike Trample is really, really good against a lot of opponents. But with your deck, you're still going to be able to get a lot of attacks through with this Avenger. And I like that. I think that's really strong. I think the last bit that says whenever an artifact opponent controls is put into a graveyard, and this deals 1 damage, is just equally good. I think this is just a good card. Just play it. I don't need to explain that. Next, we have a trifecta of cards that I like to have in mono red, which is Seize the Spoils, Big Score, and Unexpected Windfall. I would play these in any numbers that you want, but the order I would probably play it is Big Score, then Unexpected Windfall, then Seize the Spoils. Big Score and Unexpected Windfall are better because though they cost 1 more mana, they draw you 2 cards and create 2 treasures for discarding 1 card, which is really, really nice. Whereas Seize the Spoils for 1 less mana only creates 1 treasure token. And then Big Score, of course, is better because it has only 1 red pip, whereas the Windfall has 2. These cards are just generally good. You get to cast them, especially the ones that are at instant speed. You get to cast them very neatly on opponents' turns and have extra treasure so that when it becomes your turn, as you steal more cards off opponents' decks, you have the mana to do something with them. So I really do like this. It is ramp in a way because you are up mana when you untap. So I do like these. Play as many as you like. They're very, very strong. Speaking of ramp, or let's just say a sudden influx of mana, Battle Hymn feels particularly strong here. You said no tokens, so there is a limit to how good this card is, but it is something I do rather like, that you can cast Battle Hymn very easily to go from like 5 mana to, I don't know, let's say 7 to 8 mana. And then not only can you put out a few of your extra cards, this card just works really, really well with your opponent's cards because you can turn that red mana, which is the main downside of Battle Hymn, into any color, and all of a sudden you're casting pretty strong cards off of their decks. So Battle Hymn feels like an easy inclusion. a very powerful card, but I will leave you to decide. Definitely, if you go more into tokens ever, this would definitely be the card that you would like. All right, last 3 cards. Berserker's Onslaught is something that really catches my eye. I think the idea here is that I don't tend to like I know there's a white enchantment that's like this but plus lifelink for 6 mana. I think 5 mana is a lot more where I like this ability. And even then, I like this ability especially because it is not the damage that you're trying to double, but it is the trigger of the damage you're trying to double. So Berserker's Onslaught makes all of your small, yes, but evasive creatures trigger Grenzo twice, which is really, really good. Not only does this mean you're getting twice as many cards off the top of their deck, which is the easy thing to think about, but it actually makes it super, super efficient for you to goad their entire boards, right? Because usually, one of the things I think about is goading with something like Grenzo has a bit of a critical mass you need to hit. Now and then, goading 1 or 2 creatures can be incredibly powerful. Someone's got a Dark Confidant and your other opponents have big blockers, goad the Dark Confidant. All of a sudden, that's going to run into something and you're going to get rid of it. It's really nice. But outside of like key targets, like even someone having like a 10/10 or something you want to goad, it gets a little difficult to goad just a few creatures. You generally want to goad huge numbers of creatures. And so if your opponents each have like 6 creatures, let's just say, that's 18 targets, and they're all just kind of creatures you'd like to generally goad, it becomes difficult to kind of decide what to goad and how many of your attacks you should kind of make into goads as opposed to, exiling off the top of their decks. And Berserker's Onslaughts, the fact that it doubles all the triggers allows you to hit those thresholds a lot easier. If you have, let's say, 8 creatures, all of a sudden, I think when I said each opponent has 6 creatures, that might have been too many. Let's say they each have 4, whoops. So there's 12 creatures. And if you have 8 creatures and you attack and you get 16 Grenzo triggers, all of a sudden you can really easily devote 12 of them to goad the entire board, and then the last 4 to exile off of someone's deck. And I think that's a really nice plus side to this. But generally, if you attack with like 6 creatures and then you exile 12 cards off your opponent's deck, that's pretty rad too. So overall, I do just really, really like this card. All right. My last 2 cards are cards that have to do with your restrictions. This one is a bit of a budget card because it's above $4, though I'm surprised there's no copy of this card that is under $4. Regardless, it is more to do with whether or not you believe this to be stacks, and it is Blood Moon. If you are in Commander and you're in mono red, or you're in a mostly red deck, you should absolutely be playing Blood Moon. Blood Moon is one of the strongest cards you get to play in this format, and I don't think of it as stacks because it's definitely one-sided and doesn't punish monocolor players, but some people might. I think Blood Moon is just an insanely powerful card, and I think no one is ever sad for playing it. They're definitely sad about seeing it. It's not Factor Fiction, so it's not like people are locked out of the games. Factor Fiction, sorry. It's not Back to Basics, so people aren't locked out of the game, but still a very, very strong card for the deck. And then my last one is, this is the budget thing. So if I give you a card that is that is much higher out of your budget, will you still proxy it? And of course, that's Ragavan. Now, I think this is kind of cheating. I mean, I really think it's fun to play Ragavan, and I think you should proxy him. And I have my Ragavans, and they are so much fun. I think if Ragavan ever got banned out of Modern, I would definitely give him a go in Commander because he is just a ridiculously powerful card. But in your deck especially, you already have the ability, Grenzo's ability half on Ragavan, so you get double triggers or easy goads with him. But in addition, he is a great mana dork by creating treasures every turn, and you have the means to keep him hitting. So I do really, really like that here. I'll leave it up to you if you think this is breaking the rules or not, but if you can proxy it, Ragavan definitely belongs in this deck. And I think those are my suggestions for the deck. I do really like it. I like the idea of it. I like Grenzo and how it fights. these kind of low to the curve aggro decks are a lot of fun to me, so I do really appreciate where this is going. So I think my suggestions are pretty sound. I'll leave it up to you to decide. If you want to make another draft of this deck and send it my way, I would love to see it. And you can send me that draft in the link in the video description down below. And if you would like that draft to be the next deck I take a look at, there's a link for that as well. And if you like, comment, subscribe, I will be a big fan of that. Looking at this card, I just want to stop on Bedlam one more time. I really do like Bedlam here. I feel like this is maybe a card I need to try out at some point because I think it is very, very interesting. I'd be very interested to see the board state that this card creates, especially on really, really messy boards. Now, obviously, I like this with the ability to goad a bunch of creatures, especially with Grenzo, but it is catching my eye regardless. All right, with that all said, good luck with the deck, and I'm excited to see what happens.